Good evening, everyone, and welcome to Religion 101. I'm James Light. I'm a member of the board of directors of the South Coast Interfaith Council and also a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. And I'm really grateful for the opportunity that I have to participate in and host this series. Tonight, we have Dr. Liyakat Takim from McMaster University. He's from the East Coast. And so Seema Ali was one of our board members, very graciously asked Dr. Takim to speak with us about Shia Islam, and he accepted. So we're really grateful for that and looking forward to his presentation and what he has to say about the religion of Shia Islam, and also the opportunity to ask questions and have a discussion and all that kind of great stuff that we always do in Religion 101. Just a couple of things that I wanted to announce is that we do have Religion 101 scheduled for next month, and it is going to be on pagan religions, and our very own board member, the Reverend Steve Wilson from the Pacific Unitarian Universalist Church, is going to speak on that topic and invite some friends of his, perhaps. So he's working to get some folks to speak with him and share about those kind of religions. So that'll be very interesting. And if you are interested in being on our email list to get a notice of our upcoming Religion 101s, then put that in the chat. I'll copy it and add it to the list. We always hold Religion 101 on the fourth Thursday of the month from 7 to 9 p.m. and it's on Zoom, and we got the same Zoom link always. So hopefully that makes it easy. And we always post the video of our seminars on the South Coast Interfaith Council's YouTube channel, and there's a whole host of different programs that we have video from that are posted there. So, and if you ever are interested to see what's coming up, you can of any of our South Coast Interfaith Council programs, you can go to our website, which is SC for South Coast, scinterfaith.org. And so that's about it. I always kick off Religion 101s just to remind everyone that our real focus is to learn from our speaker about the religion that's featured, or faith community or church or things like that. And so we always have a lot of great questions and answers and even discussion. It is awesome to compare sometimes, to see things that are similar between our different practices and faith communities, and even things that are different. And and I always remind folks, but I don't really need to, because it really works great, is that, but I do remind folks that, we're not here to debate any principle of doctrine or belief or anything like that. It really is an opportunity for us to learn. And from my experience over the last couple of years with Religion 101, that's always what happens. So I'm so grateful for the wonderful participants that we have that participate from the South Coast and South Bay and Long Beach communities, and also folks that are participating from all sorts of places, since we're on Zoom. So Dr. Takim, we'll turn it over to you. We always offer our speaker to offer any kind of word of prayer or faith expression, whatever you feel comfortable with, or you're welcome to in exactly the order in which you would pray or offer any kind of like invocation or opening. But so we'll leave that to you, and then look forward to hearing from you. And so I'll turn it over to you. Thank you.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here in front of you. I will start with a prayer, a very short prayer. In the name of God, the most merciful and the most compassionate, O our Lord, make me contented in my soul Make me sincere in my actions. Give me light in my eyes and give me insight in my religion. Make me the best human being possible. Make me an agent of yours so that I can serve humanity. Ameen. Ya Rabbil Alameen. Yeah, I will share a screen if you don't mind, so that will make it easier for you guys to see what I have. Although I'll be doing more talking than the sharing or screening, but still. Okay, can you see it? Can you see the screen that I'm sharing?
It's coming up. Looks like it's coming up.
Yeah.
All it says is that yes, Liyakat Takim has started screen sharing.
Okay.
There we go.
All right. Can you see it now? Yeah.
Yeah, you're good.
Also see you guys. Oh. Okay, let me see. Can you see it now? Okay. If you can't see it or if you cannot hear me, let me know.
Yeah, we see it.
Okay. We want to talk about Shia Islam. Basically, there are two main groups or two main sects in Islam. The majority are called Sunnis, S-U-N-N-I-S. They form about 85% of the total population. And the minorities are the Shias, and there are a few other subgroups also. The term Shia means to follow. So obviously in itself, follow doesn't mean much. Follow whom? Follow what? Soon after the Prophet Muhammad passed away in the year 632, there was a division within the community as to who should succeed him. And the majority then selected Abu Bakr, A-B-U space B-A-K-R, to succeed him. Whereas a small minority believed that the Prophet himself had appointed Ali. Ali was a son-in-law and the cousin of the Prophet to succeed him. So, unlike Christianity, the division between the Shia and the Sunni goes back right from the beginning of Islam, soon after the Prophet himself passed away. Initially, the differences were not that clear-cut, nor were they entrenched. The Shia of Ali, basically felt that he, that is Ali, should succeed the Prophet, having been appointed by the Prophet at various occasions to succeed him. Especially at Ghadir, you see Ghadir written down there, Ghadir, where the Prophet stopped in the desert and appointed Ali to succeed him. Of course, the Sunnis have a different version to this. The Shias basically believe that succession to the Prophet lay in a particular line amongst his descendants, that is, the Prophet's descendants, starting from Ali and 11 of his sons. The Shias also believe in a special kind of charisma that is inherited within the family. So whereas the Sunnis believe that the charisma of the Prophet dissipates and gradually disappears, the Shias believe that that charisma is perpetuated in the lineage of what is called the Imams, I-M-A-M. Imam is a leader, but 12 Imams in particular, starting with Ali. The Shias were always a minority, and from the very beginning, they had felt that they were persecuted and they were wronged. They were wronged initially in their view because the rights of Ali were usurped in their understanding. Of course, the Sunnis, who are the majority, would not agree to this particular perspective. The Shias further believe that not only were the rights of Ali taken away, but that the Shias have been oppressed at various points in their history. They believe, that is, the Shias believe, in three major principles. The Imam, or the leader of the community, has three main characteristics. And from this, you will see that Shia Islam is closer to Catholicism, then to Protestantism. I always say that the Shias are the Catholics of Islam. Three main principles. The first one is Nas. You see it there on your screen, Nass. Nas means divine designation. That is the Imam, the leader of the time, who succeeds the Prophet. And by the way, the Imam is not a prophet. He does not bring a new revelation. He merely guards and explains the revelation of the Prophet Muhammad. The first principle is that of Nas, which means the divine designation. That is that the Imam is divinely designated by God to, and then the Imam then designates his own son to succeed him. The second principle or characteristic of the Imam is that of what is called Isma. Isma means infallibility. Now you'll understand what I mean by saying that the Shias are the Catholics of Islam. Very much like the infallibility of the office of the Pope, except that the Shias believe that the Imam himself is infallible. Infallible meaning that he or she, normally it is a he actually, does not choose to commit sins. In other words, distances himself from sins. And the third major principle that the Shias believe in is that of ilm or knowledge, that the Imam has got divinely designated or bestowed knowledge. That doesn't mean that the Imam knows everything, but he knows much more than what ordinary human beings do. So far we have talked of the term Shia as the origins of those who believe in Ali as a successor of the Prophet, that the Ali was appointed by the Prophet in the Shia view at various stations, various positions, especially in Ghadir, and that there are three qualities of the Imam, that is the Nas, that is divine appointment, infallibility, and divinely designated knowledge. For the Shias, this lineage of the Prophet goes through the family of the Prophet, not the companions. The family are called the Ahlul Bayt. Again, you have it there on your screen. Ahlul Bayt means the family of the Prophet in this particular case. Ali, although he was designated in the Shia belief, he never came to power until the fourth caliph. In other words, the three previous rulers before Ali, the first one was Abu Bakr, the second one was Omar, and the third one was Uthman. These three people became the caliph. Caliph meaning successor or leaders of the community. Abu Bakr ruled for 2 years after Muhammad. Umar ruled for 10 years after Abu Bakr, and Uthman ruled for 12 years after Umar. After Uthman was assassinated in the year 656, the people turned to Ali as their leader. For the Shias at least, this was the kind of a fulfillment that they were looking forward to. That is Ali as leading the community. Ali himself ruled for just about 5 years, during which he faced 3 civil wars. This was a very difficult and dark period in Islamic history. For the first time in Islamic history, Muslims fought against and Muslims killed fellow Muslims. There were various reasons for these wars. I do not wish to go into the details because this is a 101 class. Finally, Ali himself was assassinated in the month of Ramadan, which we are in now, in the year 661. He was assassinated in the mosque during his prayers, and his elder son, called Hassan, succeeded him. But Hassan was not able to rule for a long period before a dynasty was established. This was the first dynasty in Islam called the Umayyad dynasty, which lasted from the year 661 until 750. So there was an agreement between Hassan and the ruling caliph at the time that after Hassan dies, Hussein, that is the younger brother of Hassan, would be the leader of the community. But this was never fulfilled. And now comes the most perhaps defining moment of Shia history. Hussein was martyred at a place called Karbala. The reason why he was martyred was because he refused to accept the leadership of a person called Yazid, Y-A-Z-I-D. Because he refused to accept Yazid as his leader, Hussein and his small band of followers were martyred in Karbala. This generated what we may call a minority complex within Shia Islam, that they were minority, they were persecuted. Shia Islam is extremely, extremely emotional. That is the Shias, will engage in a flagellation. You've heard of the penitente, right? In South America, I believe, will flagellate themselves, excuse me. So the Shias, many of them, will flagellate until today. Flagellation was used as a form of social protest, political protest, in a culture where the Shias were not allowed to voice their opinions or to protest. Religion was used as a way of political protest too. And this happens still today, by the way. The Shias will mourn for and cry for Hussein until today, even in Los Angeles, in different parts of the Muslim world. So flagellation has become a cornerstone, and the idea of martyrdom, that it is better to die in honor than to be humiliated or live in humiliation. This was the Shia complex, if you like. So Ali was the first Shia Imam, Hassan the second, and Hussein the third Shia Imam. I do not wish to go into the details of all the 12 Imams because the Shias believe in 12 leaders, but perhaps one or two others who should be mentioned. One of them was the sixth Shia Imam, the person by the name of Ja'far, J-A-F-A-R. Ja'far was the sixth Shia Imam, and it was during his time that Islamic law took shape. It would be wrong for us to think that Islamic law was fixed right from the beginning. It went through a period of evolution. Laws always evolve with time. They never come at one particular time and stop there. Indeed, laws, whether it is Christian, Muslim, Jewish law, they all evolve according to the needs of the time. Similarly, Ja'far, who died in the year 765, was able to lay the foundation of Shia law, also called Ja'fari law. And basically, he was the one who elaborated on this principle that I talked about, the idea that the Imam has three qualities: divine designation, infallibility, and divinely bestowed knowledge, that Shia should also dissimulate. Dissimulate means to hide the truth, not necessarily to lie, but it's just like, and I would never do this, by the way, just for an example, hypothetically, if I was to point a gun at you and say you don't believe in God, otherwise I'll kill you, and I don't know what you would do, whether you would say, okay, I don't believe in God, who cares? I want to save my life. I'm like that, I'm a coward. But others will say, no, I will give my life, but I'm not going to lie. Well, Ja'far, in order to protect his followers, said, under certain circumstances, you can hide the truth in order to save your life. So dissimulation is called, meaning not to reveal the truth when and only when your life is in danger, then it is allowed. So the Sunnis, the majority, think that this is lying and hypocrisy. The Shias see it as a mode of survival. There were other Imams, as I mentioned, 12 of them. The last of the Imams was the Mahdi, M-A-H-D-I. The Mahdi for the Shia is the Messiah. He was born in the year 870 and went into a state of occultation in 874 when he was 4 years old. For the Shias, he, that is the Mahdi, is the 12th and final Imam. He's in a state of occultation. Occultation means he's alive, but you cannot see him. He is in a state of hiding, but not necessarily physical hiding, a spiritual mode. And that he, that is the Mahdi, will appear at the end of time to establish what we may call the kingdom of God, to establish justice and equality. By the way, Muslims do believe in Jesus as a prophet of God and that Jesus will come back in the end of time. He will accompany the Mahdi. So we have, if you like, a Muslim Messiah and a Christian Messiah together. This is where Islam and Christianity become very close. Whereas the Mahdi comes, but Jesus will follow him to establish the kingdom of God. The Mahdi, by the way, will appear in Mecca. We do not know when. The Sunnis also believe in the Mahdi, that a Messiah will come. But the Sunnis believe that the Mahdi will be born. He's not yet born. The Shias believe that he is already born, and he is the one who will come back at the end of time. Excuse me, I seem to be going. Okay, here we are. All right. The Shias look more to the future than the past, whereas the Sunnis believe that the ideal of Islamic empire or Islamic period was in the past, during the period of the Prophet and his companions. The Shias believe that the ideal will come in the future when the Messiah returns. So the Shias are always looking and praying for the Messiah to reappear, waiting for the Messiah, something like what Christians and Jews do. For the Sunnis, the Messiah, the Mahdi, is a shadowy figure whom they really do not know. He will come when he will come, but they never pray for him to come. Neither do they hope for a better future when he comes. So you have a different perspective here between Shias and Sunnis. But I should also emphasize there's a lot of similarities between Shia and Sunni Islam. They believe in the same God. They believe in the same prophet. They worship almost identically. They read the same Quran, that is the Muslim scripture. And a lot of their laws are very similar, some minor differences between them. Shia Muslims then believe that the Mahdi or the Messiah went into a state of hiding in the year 874. And Shia leaders or scholars then took over the task of leading the community. Excuse me. I do not wish to go through all these slides because it will take me a very long time, and not all of them are relevant. You can see there's about 20 of those slides. But a defining moment for Shia Islam occurred in 1501. In the year 1501, Iran was taken over by what we call the Safavid Empire. You'll see in your slide there, the middle one says Safavid kings. The Safavid was a dynasty that came to power in 1501 and declared Iran as a Shia state. Up to this time, Iran was always Sunni. From this time onwards, the Shias took over Iran, persecuted the Sunnis. They replaced the Sunni scholars with Shia scholars. So now you have, for the first time in its history, a Shia dynasty established. And Iran has always remained Shias until today. The scholars, often called the ulama, cooperated with the kings. And basically the Shah, the kings were called the Shah, just as the queen in England. Her name is not actually queen, it's Elizabeth, but the title is the queen. So the Shah is a title of the ruling elite. It's a long period of history. But what happens was that Shia Islam takes a different coloring now. It takes the coloring of, if you like, an empire state, whereby the Shias were now in charge, at least in Iran, although not only in Iran. The power of the scholars increased tremendously with time. The Shia scholars I'm talking of. At one point, they did not have as much power as they gradually came to assert themselves. Indeed, here we can see the difference between Shia and Sunni scholars. The Sunni scholars were always under the kings or the monarchs, and consequently, their paycheck, if you like, they were paid by the kings. Whereas the Shias believed in a certain kind of tax called khums. So whereas the Shia scholars depended on the masses for their finances, the Sunni scholars depended on their kings and rulers, on their finances. It is because of this, by the way, that Shia scholars never went to the kings. The kings had to come to the Shia scholars. And then we find something that you probably have all heard about, a person by the name of Khomeini. Khomeini was a Shia scholar himself, born in the year 1902, died in 1989. And again, he became a top scholar with time. He was not a top scholar initially until after about the 1960s, when he was recognized as what is called the marja. Marja means the person that you refer to when you need the most knowledgeable person, if you like, of the time. It was in 1963 that Khomeini became very prominent. Now, most of us had not heard of Khomeini until after the Iranian Revolution in 1979. But he actually attained prominence when, during the celebrations to mark Hussein, you remember we talked of Hussein, the grandson of the Prophet, the third Imam, when he was martyred in Karbala. The Shias always marked that, and in 1963, during this period, it's called the Muharram. Muharram is the month when Hussein was killed, that Khomeini spoke against the Shah, the current king in Iran. Faizia, which was a madrasa school, had been raided. And Khomeini said that, I'm asked not to speak against the Shah, then what is our fight against? The Shah basically had become too liberal. He had imported Western culture and Western values to Iran, which kind of alienated the masses. Tehran became a mini Washington, by the way. So Khomeini was highly critical of the Shah, and especially some of the policies of the Shah that Americans, for example, could not be tried. So as Khomeini said, that if a dog is killed in America, if the Americans kill an Iranian, he could not be tried. But if an Iranian killed a dog in America, he would be taken to court. So in other words, the life of a dog was even more important than the life of an Iranian. This is what Khomeini said. Because of this, by the way, Khomeini was arrested. He was exiled. They could not kill Khomeini because under Iranian law, you cannot kill a marja. You cannot execute a marja, that is the top scholar. It's like, I guess you cannot kill the Pope. I assume so. That's part of Italian law. I don't know. But this was enshrined in Iranian law. Because they could not kill Khomeini, they exiled him. And he ended up in Iraq until 1978. You will recall that Khomeini went to Paris. And from Paris, he was able to come back to Iran in 1979. He was exiled, as I say, initially in Turkey and then ends up in Iraq. And in the 1970s, he asked for the overthrow of the Shah. Part of the problem was Iran's excessive dependence on the West. Even though Iran was very wealthy, a lot of the oil money that was coming in was not filtering down to the people. The people were alienated from their own culture, their own mode of dressing. It's basically trying to westernize an Eastern culture. You cannot do that. The banks and the oil companies were nationalized in favor of the West. And these were part of the things that led to the overthrow over the Shah. Modernization in Iran went hand in hand with westernization. Muslims, let me be clear, are not against modernization. They are against Western cultural values, just as we do not want other people's values to be imposed on us. The Iranians and the Muslims in general felt that they should not be westernized. It is what one of the top scholars has called the Coca-Colaization of the Muslim world. Doesn't mean that Muslims don't like Coca-Cola. It means that Coca-Cola and the values associated with Coca-Cola were imposed on the Muslim community. the Shah basically outlawed the hijab, that is the Muslim headscarf, in many parts of Iran. Drugs were very much available, alcohol, pornography. Iran, as I said, became a Western state. And that led to a widespread uprising against the Shah. The army defected and the Shah had to leave. If you recall, in 1979, Khomeini came back and established what he called the Islamic Republic of Iran. And I will stop here now. I think I've spoken enough, and see if you have any other questions, and I'll be more than happy to answer any of them. I will stop sharing the slide here. Thank you.
Okay, so does anyone have any questions so far?
I see someone said that Zoroastrians also believe in a Messiah. That is true. A lot of the religions do believe in some kind of Messiah at the end of time. And of course, Shias are no exception to that. And Muharram, as Sima just said, is an Islamic month, like Ramadan. It's the first month in the Muslim calendar.
I have a question.
Sure.
Sure, go ahead, Carol.
I'm wondering, you said after the Prophet Muhammad died that there were different splits, the Sunnis and the Shias, but there were others. How many different variations are there?
There are two main schools of law, although there were no Sunnis soon after the Prophet died. The term Sunni was invented much later. But there are also, for example, Sufi Muslims. Sufis are the mystics of Islam. And again, they came about a slightly different time. And then there were, within Shias, there are different groups. Within Sunnis, there are different groups. Within Sufis, there are different groups. So there are groups, subgroups, and subgroups, if you know what I mean. The main one. Well, if you like, how many groups are there in Christianity? Oh, too many, right?
Right.
Yeah, so it's something like that, but not as many in Islam, but certainly there are. Even in Judaism, as you know, there are three main groups, and then there are groups within those groups, the Reformed, the Orthodox, and the Conservatives, Christians, Jews rather. And similarly, within Islam, there are, within Shia, there are subgroups. And of course, in America, you had other groups which came up later on in the name of Islam, like the Nation of Islam, which Malcolm X belonged to at one point in time. And so did Cassius Clay, aka Muhammad Ali. So there are groups and subgroups.
Okay, another question. When I imagine at the beginning there was maybe a little animosity between the different the groups, but now after all these generations have passed, are the feelings between the different groups
amicable? Hello? Oh.
Carol, you cut out at the end. Was that your question? What are sort of the feelings and attitudes between the different groups nowadays?
Yes, I'm sorry, I got a phone call and I think it cut me off. So are there good feelings among the different groups now, even though they went different routes, or is there? I don't know if animosity is the right word, but are there?
The right word, because sometimes that does come about too. You're right. Most of the time, Shias and Sunnis have coexisted, intermarried, lived together. But you always have this, what you may call the fringe minority fundamentalists, who unfortunately believe that the only way out is violence. And this happens in all religious traditions, not only in Islam. So you have certain fundamentalist groups like the ISIS or Al-Qaeda, etc. For the ISIS, they target the Shias because they believe the Shias are heretics. So the bombings that we see in Pakistan at the moment, for example, most of them are targeted against the minority Shias. You find similar things happening in Afghanistan, where the Hazaras are the Shias. They are targeted by certain fundamentalist Sunni group. I should make it clear that most Sunnis are very peaceful and law-abiding citizens. They don't have a problem with the Shia. They say, well, the Shias are Muslims, but there are different kinds of Muslims, which is fair enough. Just as you have Christians who are, Catholics, there are Protestants, and you have many subgroups, Lutherans, Baptists, and so on. But, they don't go around killing each other. So well, they have a different viewpoint. So most of the Sunnis do accept Shia Islam as a different kind of Islam. But there are fringe minorities on both sides, I should make it clear. But primarily amongst the Sunnis who target Shias because they see them as dissenters, as heretics, and in some cases they even believe that the best way to get to heaven is to kill a Shia, which is atrocious, but there it is. In Pakistan, Ahmadiyas are also killed and persecuted. That is also true. And the reason why that happens, and I'm not saying this is right, but it does happen. The reason why Ahmadis are killed and persecuted is because most Muslims believe that Ahmadis are not fit to be called Muslims. The reason being because in their view, Ahmadis have a different prophet. Muslims believe that the last prophet was the Prophet Muhammad. Ahmadis believe, according to their own views, according to their own books, that a person by the name of Ghulam Ahmad came and claimed to be a prophet or a Messiah. Now, being a Messiah is one thing, being a prophet is another. Because some Ahmadis believe that Ghulam Ahmad is a prophet, they are seen as being outside the fold of Islam. Now, seeing somebody as outside the fold of Islam is one thing, but persecuting and killing them is another. And I certainly do not condone any killing of innocent people. Because there is freedom of conscience in Islam. People are allowed, are free to believe what they want to believe. I believe Thomas Rosenberg has a question.
Yes, thanks so much, by the way, for talking to us. Just a couple quick questions. How many Shia are there in the U.S. approximately today? And where are the bigger communities? Are they in the major cities or are they spread out? And then my second question is just about the Marja. How many guides or leaders, Marja, are there in the world today? Are there? Does every community have a Marja, or is it, very few? Those are my questions.
Yeah. I would refer you to a book which I have written, by the way. It's called Shiism in America. It's available on Amazon. I'm not trying to promote my book, but it answers a lot of the questions that you pose. It's called Shiism in America, written by me. There are approximately 2 million Shias in America. There are about 8 to 9 million Muslims in America. The Shias are concentrated in the larger cities, but they are everywhere. But you have a large Shia population in Los Angeles. We have Sima Ali, who's also Shia. And then you have probably the largest Shia population is in Detroit, or a suburb of Detroit called Dearborn. I do not know what you've heard of Dearborn. Shias and Sunnis migrated towards that area in the 1880s, coming from what we now call Lebanon, at that time called Greater Syria. And you have perhaps the best baklava that you want in America. You can order it from Dearborn, by the way. It's online too. And there are Shia communities also in Chicago, in Atlanta, in Washington, in New York, almost anywhere that you can think of, there are Shia communities. But a few of the largest ones are in places like certainly Detroit, Atlanta, Chicago, Texas, Houston, and so on.
Yeah, I'm from Chicago originally, so I know Dearborn very well. And
Dearborn.
And yeah. Yes. Really interesting. And then just a question on the Marja of
Marja is seen as the one of the most well-known and educated, knowledgeable figures. So not every community has a Marja. There may be about 7 or 8, maximum 10 Marjas in the world today. Most of them are concentrated either in Iran or in Iraq. I do not know of any marja living in America. But basically what it means that you follow the dictates or the rulings of a particular leader. Just as, for example, a Catholic would refer to the Pope for any question that he or she may have, and the local priest is not able to respond to it. And of course, there are new questions and new issues which arise continuously. For example, issues on euthanasia, on in vitro fertilization, and so on, issues which never arose in the Quran or during the time of the Prophet. So the marja would then give, after consulting the sources and using his own rational faculties, would respond to particular issues which arise in time.
I just had one other question. I apologize. Is there a mystical part of the theology in Shiism? Is there, like Sufi? Is that also? Is that Shia also, or is that on Sunni side?
No, that's a very good question, and I appreciate the question. Sufis can be Shias or Sunnis. The majority of the Sufis are Sunnis, but Sufism itself is a mystical trend in Islam, which allies itself very closely to the Shia Imams. So they have what we call a chain. They trace their lineage to the Prophet. And most of their Sufi lineages go through Ali, the one that I mentioned, the first Imam. Plus, there is a mystical trend within Shia Islam, but it's more theosophical, more philosophical, called irfan, means gnosis, gnosis. So it's not as like the Sufis will just go whirling around or dancing around. But for the Shias, there is definitely a mystical trend which goes through the Imams and is traced back to the Prophet himself.
Can you explain what you mean by a mystical trend, or even the mysticism? I guess I'm not familiar enough with religious studies to understand what the definition is.
The mystics of Islam came soon after the death of the Prophet, and they believe that rather than just the outer, there is an interior path to connect with God. So the outer path will be just the prayers and the formal devotions. Like if you go to a church or you go to a synagogue, this is what we call the ritual. But the mystics wanted to go beyond the outer to the inner. In other words, through certain types of mystical services, devotions, which would include extra prayers, extra recitation of the Quran, extra spiritual states. That these spiritual states, like yoga is, through meditation, through chanting of God's names, you can attain higher levels of existence. You can experience the presence of God here and now inside you, because God doesn't live outside you, he lives inside you, in their view. So basically, they go sometimes through trances, but they also observe the outer. I'm not saying they do not observe the outer. They perform the prayers, the fast that other Muslims do, but they go beyond that.
So I think that, it would it be sort of like maybe analogous to the concept of the Holy Ghost in Christianity. It's like this ability to have this, let's say, spiritual connection to God, sort of how it relates to the concept of a person's what type of relationship can a person have with God. It sounds like it relates a little bit to that. There's one where it's, and I don't know that it's necessarily, I'm sure it wouldn't be considered a constraint, but that, it's like you and I are talking, and that maybe there's in one, the non-mystical aspect is that God is a little bit more separated in this, as opposed to a mystical person's view would be like they want to sort of have this feeling of God's presence, or sort of some connection, let's say spiritual connection or emotional connection. Is that sort of what, sort of in line with the concept?
Basically, yes. It's more detailed than that, of course, because
Yeah.
states and different stations on the path. They talk of a path to God. You start at the lowest, the beginning, and you have a guide who will help you. Sometimes you go into a kind of a mystical retreat. You undergo through certain spiritual states, certain spiritual devotional services. It could involve extra fasting, extra prayers. It could involve meditation, remembrance of God, and so on. And the final state would be whereby you feel yourself in the presence of the divine. You feel the light of God as you see as clearly as the sun. I see another question here, and I'm not sure if it's a question or a comment. In Yemen, there is a proxy war going on between Iran and Saudi Arabia, where civilians have been bombed by Saudi coalition with American supplied weapons. The answer is absolutely yes. There is unfortunately not only America, but even here in Canada, we supply Saudi Arabia with weapons which they use to bomb innocent civilians. I mean, we are all totally aghast and totally horrified by what's happening in Ukraine, as we should be. But unfortunately, the war in Yemen has been going on for so long, and we barely hear about it on the outskirts. The media doesn't cover it much. Unfortunately, there are people today in Yemen, in Afghanistan, who are literally selling parts of their bodies, kidneys, livers, in order to make ends meet. They are selling their children in order to make the ends meet. Well, we do not hear about it. We hear about Ukraine as we should. But what is worse is that the Saudis are using American, Western supplied weapons to basically bomb families, hospitals, etc. And nobody seems to care. We barely hear about it. And I think this is where the media comes in. The media is very selective in what it chooses to cover and what it doesn't choose to cover. You're right, BBC.
Yeah, that's true, right? I mean, everyone's so shocked to learn that there's been other, like, in Syria and in Georgia and other places that people are like, wait, what that happened? And then you're so right about how the media doesn't talk. I mean, we really do get a very filtered, narrow perspective, unless you go and search for other sources, like Manek has talked about BBC, and there's perhaps probably other sources that you can get online to find out, but it's definitely not what comes through the 4 or 5 sources that probably most folks probably in Europe and the US routinely use, right, to find out what's going on. I have a question, and that sort of relates to that. I mean, it's interesting. Manek brought up all these different hostilities and conflicts and stuff, and it's interesting to me that you talked about the historical, political strife aspects of in talking about the religion. Why is it, do you think that and I can postulate some reasons, but I'd be interested to hear your thoughts on why is it that there's such a strong association with, let's say, political power and all the things that go along with that, conflict, violence, strife in government and things like this associated with Shia Islam, and I don't know, and maybe that wasn't your intent to draw that close connection, but maybe that was your intent, and there's a reason for that. I would be fascinated to understand your thoughts.
I'm not sure if I got you correctly. Why is there a strong connection in Shia Islam and politics? Is that what you're saying? Is that your question?
You gave some examples of of Khomeini, right? And essentially, I'll say, his political marginalization, persecution, right? His exile, and then sort of his involvement in a political sphere of and connecting the religion to that. is there a reason for that? Is there, I mean, it also, you know, we have a very pluralistic society in the West, and it's one perspective to look at the West as corrupt and full of alcohol and drugs and pornography, and but you know, we in my church religion, we lament the same thing, you know, in the West, and but we know that those types of vices, negative aspects of society are prolific all over the world, you know, not just in, you know, one country, but they're prolific. So I'm interested to, I guess I'm trying to understand, what is that, why is there such a close connection to sort of the government connection to the religion in Iran, and perhaps as it you know, does that affect the perspective of folks who then practice you know, Shia Islam in Canada or the US or other I'll say Western countries. I won't say free countries, because there's a lot of question as to how free, you know, even the US is today for the practice of religion. No, you know, so there's definitely but I'm fascinated with that connection.
I think we need to understand that historically, religion and politics went hand in hand in Islam. This was the way that things were in the past. In other words, the caliph or the ruler was both a religious and an overseer of the, he was a political and an overseer of the religious domain. Although the main religious figures were the scholars, but the scholars were often under the caliphs or at least controlled by them to some degree. So religion and politics always went hand in hand in Islam. The idea of secularization is something of a novice, something new to Islam itself. But that doesn't mean that, you know, it's not there. It is there now, especially in the present century, where most Muslim countries are either semi or fully secular now. But this is, if you, as I said, something which is relatively new. There was always a caliph who was the overseer, just like the queen is the head of the British Empire. In any case,
well, I think the Queen is also the head of the Church of England, right? So, I mean, you know, maybe it's not something that's really as out there, but there is other examples of where the state and religion are intertwined, and perhaps it doesn't affect everyone's day to day as dramatically, but there are plenty of examples of that for sure, right?
In Shia Islam, most Shias believe that religion and politics will go hand in hand only when the Messiah comes. So Khomeini's view was actually an anomaly. Most Shia scholars would not agree with Khomeini that religion and society and politics should go hand in hand now. So you find a lot of Shia scholars who debated, discussed, and disagreed with Khomeini. So for example, you have Iraq, which is also predominantly Shia, although not completely Shia. The majority of the Shias in Iraq, the majority of the people are Shias. But yet, if you look at the marja of Iraq today, Ayatollah Sistani, he does not subscribe to the same view as Khomeini or his neighbor country, Iran does. It cannot happen in Iraq because Iraq is a large Sunni population. So whereas he does guide the people in terms of what he feels should be done in terms of, you know, the well-being of the community, but he is not ever seen as the religious or the political head of Iraq. They highly revere him. Sistani is very well respected throughout the Shia world, but yet he does not involve himself directly in political matters, unlike what's happening in Iran today. So you have two strands of Shia Islam.
Yeah, that helps. So it's interesting that you explain the idea of a religion and politics together, or religion and government together after the Messiah. That's a common Christian belief, and that's a belief that in my church we have as well, is that when, I mean, our belief is that when we believe that Jesus Christ will return, and that he will establish his government, and that will be the government, and it will be a religious, religion and government will be combined. And you see that a little bit. The other parallel that I draw is that sometimes, like in Utah, where members of my church are predominant, but by far, the religious principles, are reflected in politics and in government, right? The sort of the values, at least, and some of which are maybe more specific to our church. You'll see that reflected in Utah. So in Utah, you'll go there, and the majority of businesses, at least for many years, less so now, were closed on Sundays, right? And then every other state, it was like everyone had business, so you could see, and sometimes you still do see, that religious influence, sort of reflected in the government, in the laws, in the ordinances, and things like that. So I definitely have an appreciation for that, and also that the notion of, in the U.S., of the separation of church and state, I think some folks could readily argue, has been taken to sort of an extreme, in that it's almost like now the state has to eliminate religion from anything related to the state. So you have prayer in school, right, or something like that, which most members of my church would be just fine with, and it would be fine to allow different people to pray, according to their religion, just like we do in our Religion 101 seminar. But our government, is very much, enforces an elimination of religion, so it's not a separation of church and state, it's an elimination of church in the state. So I appreciate that, because I understand. So for some, perhaps for Khomeini, the idea that religion and government are intertwined is like not a big deal. It's a natural thing. It's a fundamental to, or at least it's maybe not. It's perfectly reasonable. Whereas you're explaining that some Shias, they don't have that idea. They want more. They see it as more separation. That, oh, that's something in the future when the Messiah returns, and we'll have that kind of order, established. So, okay, thank you for explaining that. It really helps. Does anyone else have another question? Well, if not, I'll ask another ones. Yeah, Manek's put a lot of chat out here. Manek says politicians use religion to get power. No doubt that you see that everywhere, right? So I have a question. So can you talk about what is done to help? I always like to ask our speakers to talk about how their religious community help young people to make good choices. And it could be, what type of, let's say, formal religious study or scriptural study or scholarly study or practices that are in that community to help young people, children, teenagers, young adults. I say make good choices, but what I mean is basically live to the values and the doctrines. So can you give some examples of how that is done in Shia Islam?
Okay, I can talk about here in Canada, at least in Toronto, because there is a pretty big mosque here, there's a big community. And what we do is we have regular lectures. The lectures are in English now, every week. For the younger generation, there is also what we call a Sunday school as I know they have also in Los Angeles. So, you know, the young kids will go to Sunday school. But in addition, we have built a multi-purpose center. So it's not only a mosque, there are gymnasiums, so there's so many other activities. In other words, the youths are attracted to the center because of other activities apart from just the prayers and the classes, in order to facilitate them to be and to meet with each other. So it's kind of building positive peer pressure instead of to combat the negative peer pressure. In addition, sometimes they have certain outings they go to. They have sports events, and they have youth committees also. They arrange their own programs. Sometimes they have lectures for the youth separately. So all these events hopefully help ensure that the youths are not alienated from religion. And they have, yes, as Seema says, volunteer services for the youth too. So different groups, different communities have different kinds of activities to help preserve the identity of the youth, because there's so much negative things going on out there: drugs, alcohol, and gun violence in America now, especially, God forbid, but it's spiraling out of control. Almost every week there's a mass shooting in America, as you know. So it's one way of trying to help or protect the youth from the negative effects that they have outside the community.
Great, thanks. I like your talking about sports and stuff. In most meeting houses in my church, there's actually a gym, you know, and so sports are always an important part of activities that can bring, you know, that can bring the youth together, and adults too. We have plenty of adults that like to come over and play basketball like once a week in one of our buildings here locally. So and also the idea of bringing them together and giving them activities that are a mix, right, of social activities, sports activities, religious activities, things like that, can be really positive. Thanks for sharing that. Any other questions? I have a couple more, so I'll fire mine out, but I want to give everyone else a chance. Any other folks have questions?
I have another one, James.
Sure, please, Carol.
So in many religions right now, it seems that there are many young people who are leaving the church that they were brought up in. Is that something that you're experiencing as well?
Before I answer that, do you know why they are leaving the church? Have you ever tried to find out?
Well, from my understanding, just that people are maybe not as interested in religion. They're maybe not just the values. A lot of their values are somewhat different than their parents were, and they just aren't feeling a need. I know it's a problem in many churches where the membership is going down in most churches in the world now, as opposed to where it used to always go up.
Well, religion, Islam is spreading fast, by the way, probably the fastest spreading, growing religion, even in America. However, we do have these issues which you are describing, that of many youth being alienated from the mosque, many youth feeling that they are somehow the mosque does not address the issues that they are confronted with. So we do have that also. We try and counter that with trying to get more charismatic speakers, or trying to address issues which would interest the youth. I mean, I lecture in a university, I teach there, so I encounter many, many Muslim youths here in Canada. And I get to know at least some of the issues that they are confronted with, which bother them. And generally, I think that what drives people away, not only youth, but people away, is what we may call the superficial religion, where religion is just on the outside. You just do things for the sake of doing it. Sometimes that superficial also becomes artificial. And the youth are looking for a more deeper understanding of religion. I feel, I could be wrong, but at the same time, I think that they focus more on the morality, the spirituality. They want to go from the ritual to the spiritual, as I said. And you're right. I think Manek is right that young people don't trust adults when they see hypocrisy of adults in the name of religion. I completely agree, and that happens in all religions, by the way, not only in one particular religion. But there is also another. I think Ray says that somehow we in the West have demoralized ourselves. Demoralized means that we have reduced, or perhaps even somehow nothing is wrong. We can do whatever we like, and it's okay. And I think that's the problem. Arises when we become too tolerant to everything. In others, we have to have certain boundaries. And I'm not talking only as a Muslim, I'm talking as a human being, that any religion, for it to be respected and for it to survive, has to have certain boundaries. We cannot have a kind of free-for-all religion. Because when you do that, then when you do things, there is no distinction between right and wrong. And this applies especially to the adults, because when the adults start doing that, then the younger generation feel, well, there's nothing wrong. If my parents can do that, why not me? So we have to have certain principles, but at the same time, we have to speak to the needs of the youth. I'm critical myself of those speakers who basically engage in rhetorics or talk of the same issue that they talked 40, 50 years ago. Religion has to be connected with the lives of the people. If no, it's not, then religion becomes an ideal rather than a reality in the lives of the people.
Thank you. And
Yeah, well said. Thank you.
That concept was brought up that I hadn't thought of immediately, but that one of the prevailing beliefs that I have seen over the last maybe 20 years is, and maybe it's been around longer than that, is that whatever I think is right for me is right. Maybe what your truth is for you, my truth is for me, as opposed to that there is truth is truth, regardless of whether you believe it's truth.
Well, there is what we call a universal moral values, universal standards that we all share regardless of our religion. That killing is wrong, that lying is wrong, hypocrisy is bad, that we all share. We may differ in our laws for sure. You worship your way, I worship my way. But there are certain principles that we all share as human beings. And I think that we have lost track of those universally held moral values. We have relativized morality.
Thank you very much.
Well, yeah, and I would say that a big part of that is based on who we elect as our government leaders, right? Because they have such influence, so we, that the tolerance of those kind of values and examples, sort of contribute to that. So thanks for that perspective. I was going to ask, sort of in relation to that, Seema mentioned service, and can you give some description on sort of what the role is? I mean, what's maybe the role of two things, because I see that there's sort of two types of service. One is service where you're sort of helping a person, and then there's this notion, and perhaps it's a more Christian notion of ministering, where it's like seeing to the needs of a person. It may be temporal or material, but also to their spiritual needs, and how that sort of relates to both the faith community and the relationships amongst folks that serve each other and help and perhaps minister, support each other, and which is sort of the difference between, to me, being religious versus being spiritual. And, usually it's interesting what Seema said. I've heard folks say, oh, that they're spiritual when they basically don't go to church, right? Or don't go, that they're really not part of a community. And then also the relation, and then also service to those outside the community. Can you give some ideas to sort of what sort of the practice is, of the maybe the values that go along with that?
So the
For
question
Shia Muslims?
the question is, what kind of services do we offer to the community members? Is that what you're asking?
Just sort of what's the role of service in a person practicing their religion, right? In Shia Islam. And there's sort of, like I said, two kinds of service. One is to serve, sort of helping people in need, okay, caring for the poor and needy, let's say, as a type of service. And then there's other service, which is, let's say, sort of ministering to or relating to sort of the relationships among people within the community, maybe, relation to poor and needy, but also spiritually poor and needy. So sort of, teaching others and supporting others and showing love to others and things like that.
This applies especially to groups or areas where there's a larger Shia community, like Toronto, Canada, for example, or Detroit, etc., whereby people are encouraged, Shias are encouraged to engage in volunteering services within the community. It could be just helping out in the mosque. It could be reaching out, not necessarily only to those less fortunate, but also those who suffer from loneliness. Especially in the pandemic area, we've found a tremendous increase in mentally related issues. People who are going through depressions, people who are going through anxieties. So community members are highly encouraged to participate or help those. There are also seniors. A lot of the people now are seniors who need to go and do some groceries, who need to just go, somebody to go and talk to them, somebody to go and walk with them. So there's a lot of communal services are provided, community-related services. Sometimes somebody has to go and cook for somebody, So it's not necessarily only charity. Charity is certainly a very important aspect of it. But
yeah, for sure. And that's what I was at. That's sort of the difference I was making, is that not all service is for someone who's, let's say, economically poor, right, or disadvantaged. It can be for someone who, has had a loss, right, or has a need because of their age or their situation where they're not around as many people or something, and they can use friendship.
By the way, in the West, see, in our own countries, we had a very closely knit neighborhood whereby everybody knew everybody else. You could just walk into your neighbor's home. There is a saying in Arabic, al-jar qabla ad-dar, your neighbor comes before your own house. In other words, you reach out and your neighbors have a right over you. That doesn't happen here, basically. We can barely share a driveway with our neighbor, let alone share, anything else. But also Shias and Muslims in general are highly encouraged to reach out to the wider non-Muslim community. So for example, here in Canada, we have Out from the Cold. It gets very cold here, unlike Los Angeles. So interestingly, Muslims, Jews, and Christians participate together to go and reach out to the homeless, for example, give them some food or give them a place where they can find some shelter when it's very cold. That's just one aspect of it. Especially after 9/11, I know Muslims tried to show the humanitarian side of Islam. I was in Denver, Colorado, and we used to have what we call Ansar pantry, whereby anybody who needed can just go to a particular pantry and grab whatever they wanted. These are just some of the examples. And again, loneliness. There was a lot of dialogue going on, something like what we're doing today. But especially after 9/11, people wanted to understand Islam more. I was invited to so many churches and synagogues and temples. So, and I think that in a multicultural society, as we are living in now, we need to have that kind of dialogue and connection with each other, because so much hatred is being perpetrated on the social media. You will not believe how much. The problem with social media is this: there is no censorship. Anybody can say anything and can generate hatred and dislike for others. And that's what we need to combat, So these are some of the things.
Manek put a question in the chat. He said, well, is it true or, so I'll read his question as he wrote it. Is it true that Prophet Muhammad considered the term Ummah to include all humans, but later it became to mean all Muslims only? So I guess really the question is what is, for Shia Islam, what is this this idea or concept of Ummah? Is it UMMA? Is that how it's said?
Whether the Shia or Sunni is the same, concept is the same. The Prophet established a community when he migrated to Medina. And that community comprised also of different Jewish tribes. So the Jews were part of the Ummah. In fact, there is a pact or an agreement called the Constitution of Medina. That Constitution of Medina kind of is a blueprint of how human beings should live. And the Jews were part of it. It was only later on when some of the Jews left Medina for various other reasons, and the community expanded, but the Ummah came to be identified only with Muslims. But in reality, we are all part of the Ummah of humanity. So whether you belong to a church or you belong to a synagogue or a temple, the first identity, I always say, is the human identity. I'm a human being first, then I'm a Muslim. And if we forget that, then we can forget Islam or we can forget Christianity too.
Great, thank you. I wanted to ask, let's see, anybody else have a question? I have one more. Can you just talk a little bit and describe a little bit about sort of like sort of the practice of worship? Do you talked about Sunday school for youth, and I don't know if that's for adults as well. Is there like a regular worship time like in the week, or are there special? Obviously, there's like Ramadan and the holidays associated with that and things like that. But can you just describe a little bit about what are maybe some of the more significant aspects of worship in Shia Islam?
They are almost the same as Sunni Islam. As I said, Sunnis and Shias, they are very close in many, many ways. All Muslims, whether Shias or Sunnis, are required to offer 5 prayers every day. 5 prayers early in the morning, lunchtime, mid-afternoon, evening, and at night. There are extra prayers that a person can offer, it doesn't have to offer. The main services are on Fridays. So basically in Muslim countries, Friday is a holiday where people will congregate at lunchtime for Friday prayers. And then of course there are the Ramadan, the fasting in Ramadan that we are going through right now. So 3 days left now. And then there are other things like the obligation to go to Mecca at least once in your lifetime and so on. But there are extra prayers, again, they're voluntary, they're not required, they're not mandatory at night, because the Quran does ask the Prophet and Muslims to spend a portion of your night in prayers. So midnight, 2 a.m., whatever time you can, you wake up and remember your Lord. And that's it's a very spiritual time, by the way, to pray. It makes, because everybody's sleeping and you are alone with your Lord, and you feel the presence of the divine much more, I think, through these kinds of extra worship.
Yeah, for sure. I'm sure that's the case. So have you had a chance to go to take a trip to Mecca?
Yes,
and can you share what that experience was for you? Not, I mean, not so much the details, but just sort of, overall, sort of how the significance it brought to your life.
The first time I went to Mecca was in 1976, when I was only 19 years old. I'm giving away my age now. I'm 65, but I don't mind saying that. Mecca has changed. The whole pilgrimage season has changed. Now things have become easier now. Initially, they were very, very difficult. But it's a very, very spiritually enlivening experience, because you're not only seeing history, you are living history. You are experiencing. Just like for a Jew, for example, to go to Bethlehem, or excuse me, for a Christian to go to Bethlehem or to Jerusalem, which is very holy for all the three monotheistic religions. This is where Muhammad was born, this is where he lived, and so on. So, and plus the number of people with you, it makes for a very, very socially cohesive, solidifying experience. It's impossible to describe it. You have to really experience it. And part of the pilgrimage requires a person to be totally, totally committed to God. Because one of the things that we do when we go for pilgrimage, we don a special garb. And then we recite something called the talbiyah. Talbiyah means to say, here I am, oh my Lord, here I am. I'm at your service. There is nobody like you, oh my Lord, I'm at your service. You basically blank out everything and are completely committed and devoted to the divine. That is an amazing experience. In fact, every pilgrim goes there and is required to wear the same kind of clothing. So whether you are rich or poor, black or white, king or pauper, everybody is the same in front of God. Even religious scholars take off their normal garbs and are dressed normally. It shows that egalitarianism, if you like. Of course, this is in theory, things don't work out like that in practice. If you don't mind, I will take your leave in about 5-10 minutes because this is Ramadan and other things that I have to do.
Sure, for sure. So I just wanted to mention, I had the chance to go. Our church has what's called a general conference every 6 months, and one of the more sort of more unusual practices to actually go to the church headquarters in Salt Lake City to watch it live, right, like in person. And it's a fascinating experience when literally tens of thousands of people are coming for the different sessions, 2-hour sessions in the morning, the afternoon, the evening. And there's 25,000 people, in an auditorium, and there are just people everywhere, to participate in that sort of, I guess you'd say, communal experience, right? Of worship, but also focus, right, on things like that. So yeah, so that I can appreciate that, at least part. Yeah, no, I know it's a very large number of people there, so that's great. If there's no other questions, then thanks everyone for your questions and comments and discussions, and absolutely, especially thank you, Dr. Takim, for your willingness at this late hour to meet with us and provide some really wonderful insight and knowledge on your faith and also your practice of study. So we really appreciate that. We can leave with any kind of word of prayer that you would like to offer up, and that would be great.
Oh, in the name of God, the most merciful, the most compassionate. Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen. I'll say it in Arabic and in English. Glory be to Lord, the Lord of the universe, the most kind and most merciful, the one who is the master of the day of judgment. We worship you only, and to you we turn. Forgive us, O Lord, of all our transgressions. O our Lord, grant us the path of those who have pleased you, not the path of those who have gone away from you. O our Lord, make us amongst those who are pure and pious. Make us pure and sincere to serve you and to serve humanity. Amen.
Amen. Thank you. Thank you, everyone. We'll see you next month. So in May, and thanks again to our speaker, and for offering such beautiful prayers at the beginning and the end. And so everyone have a great evening. You too, Dr. Takim, enjoy your iftar and as you retire. So thank you very, very much for your willingness to speak to us this evening.
It's been my honor. Thank you.
Thank you. Goodbye, everyone. Have a great evening.
Thank you. Thank you much. Ciao.